The CUM array at Research Station Omega-7 hadn't worked properly in months. Marcus Reed had filed 17 maintenance requests, each one stamped with the same response: non-essential repairs postponed pending budget review. Emergency channel crackled to life at 0300 hours. He almost ignored it entirely. Marcus hunched over his console in the cramped communications bay, surrounded by blinking displays and humming processors. The night shift was always quiet, just him, the automated systems, and the endless black of space, visible through the small porthole beside his desk. He'd been monitoring deep space frequencies for 3 years, cataloging asteroid movements, and recording routine transmissions from passing cargo vessels. Nothing exciting ever happened on Omega-7. The signal started as a whisper beneath the usual interference. At first, Marcus thought it was feedback from the station's own systems, but something about the pattern made him pause. It wasn't random static. There was a rhythm to it, almost like breathing. He isolated the frequency and ran it through the audio filters. Cleaning up the noise layer by layer, what emerged made his blood run cold. It sounded like crying. Not human crying, the pitch was wrong, the cadence unfamiliar but unmistakably. The sound of distress. Worse, it seemed to be coming from inside the station itself. Somewhere in the lower levels he'd never been authorized to access. Marcus glanced around the empty communications bay. Protocol dictated that any unidentified signals be reported immediately to Station Commander Cross, but something held him back. The lower levels were classified. Whatever was down there wasn't supposed to exist, and anyone making sounds like that wasn't supposed to be heard. He'd grown up in the outer colonies, where people minded their own business and asked few questions. But he'd also grown up believing that when someone was in trouble, you helped them. The crying and the static tugged at something deep in his chest, a memory of his younger sister calling for him during thunderstorms. Small and afraid in the dark dot, the signal faded, then returned stronger. This time, Marcus caught something else buried in the transmission. Words. They weren't in any language he recognized, but they carried the universal tone of pleading. Someone was begging for help. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of reporting the signal, he began recording it. He set up a secure partition on his personal drive and started documenting every transmission. If someone was being held against their will in the station's restricted areas, he needed evidence before he could act. Over the next 4 hours, the signals came in waves. Sometimes they were strong enough that he could make out what sounded like a child's voice. There are times they faded to barely audible whispers. But they never stopped completely, as if the sender was too frightened to remain silent for long. As dawn's cycle began and the station's main lights flickered on, Marcus realized he was in deeper than he'd intended. The frequency was encrypted. Using protocols he didn't recognize, military-grade, possibly experimental, someone with serious resources was trying to keep these transmissions secret. The communications bay door hissed open, and Marcus quickly minimized his recording interface. Lieutenant Hayes, the day shift supervisor, walked in, carrying a steaming cup of synthetic coffee. "Any activity overnight?" Hayes asked, settling into the adjacent workstation. Marcus hesitated. Just the usual cargo traffic, nothing significant. It was his first lie about the signal. It wouldn't be his last. As Hayes began his morning diagnostics, Marcus transferred his recordings to a portable drive and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Whatever was happening in the lower levels, he was now the only person who knew about it. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders like a lead blanket. The crying and the static had found him. Now he had to find its source. Dr. Elena Vasquez had always been curious about frequencies that didn't belong. As the station's xenolinguist, she spent her days analyzing communication patterns from distant civilizations, searching for meaning in alien transmissions that most people dismissed as cosmic noise. So when Marcus Reed slipped her an encrypted data chip during lunch break, claiming it contained something unusual, her scientific instincts immediately took over. Elena waited until her lab was empty before loading the recordings. Her specialized equipment could break down audio signatures in ways the standard communications array couldn't. As the first transmission played through her enhanced speakers, she felt her breath catch. This wasn't just alien communication. It was a child's voice, terrified and desperate. The language structure was unlike anything in her databases. The vowel patterns suggested a larynx designed for different atmospheric pressure, while the consonants implied a tongue more flexible than human anatomy allowed. But beneath the alien phonetics, the emotional content was heartbreakingly universal. The child was calling for someone, a parent perhaps, or anyone who might listen. Alina worked through the night, building translation matrices and cross-referencing the vocalizations with known xenolinguistic patterns. By morning, she'd managed to decode fragments of the transmissions. The words that emerged made her hands shake as she typed her notes. Double quotes, please, ... can't breathe, ... help me, ... The child wasn't just afraid. They were in physical pain, trapped somewhere with limited air supply. Elena's training told her to report this immediately, but her instincts warned her against it. The encryption on these signals was military-grade. Whoever was responsible had government backing. She dug deeper into the station's classified databases, using her xenological clearance to access files most personnel never saw. What she found in the buried research reports made her sick. Project Silent Echo, an experimental program designed to study telepathic abilities in alien specimens. The official documentation was sanitized, but reading between the lines painted a horrific picture. They were experimenting on a child. The subject was listed only as Specimen 47, a hybrid of unknown origin with demonstrated psychic abilities. The reports detailed controlled stress testing and neural pathway analysis. But Elena recognized torture when she saw it disguised as science. The child's telepathic abilities were being artificially amplified through pain and fear, creating the signal leakage that Marcus had discovered. Elena's hands trembled as she read the latest medical report. The subject was weakening. The experiments were pushing their physiology beyond sustainable limits. Without intervention, Specimen 47 would be dead within weeks. She sat alone in her lab, surrounded by the cold glow of monitors displaying a child's dying words. The smart thing would be to delete everything and pretend she'd never seen it. The safe thing would be to transfer off station before she became complicit in whatever was happening in the restricted levels. Instead, Lena made a copy of everything she'd discovered and sealed it in a quanto-encrypted package. She couldn't save the child alone, but she knew someone who might be willing to try. Captain Joran Blake ran supplies to the outer colonies, and his ship had a reputation for carrying cargo that wasn't always listed on official manifests. If anyone would be willing to help extract an alien child from a military research facility, it would be a smuggler with his own reasons to distrust authority. The next morning, Alina submitted a routine request for expanded xenological samples, claiming she needed specimens from the lower research levels for her linguistic analysis. It was a thin cover story. It would give her legitimate access to the restricted areas where the child was being held. As she prepared for what might be the most dangerous decision of her career, Alina played the recordings one more time. The child's voice was weaker now, the pleas more desperate. Time was running out. She'd spent her life studying alien languages, searching for ways to bridge the gap between species and build understanding across the vast loneliness of space. Now she had the chance to save a life that represented everything she'd dedicated her career to protecting. Alina locked her lab and headed for the restricted elevator. The child in the static was waiting, and she was done listening from a distance. Captain Joran Blake had been running contraband for 15 years, long enough to recognize when someone was about to ask him to do something spectacularly illegal. Dr. Alina Vasquez sat across from him in the dimly lit cargo bay of his ship, the wayward star clutching a data pad like it contained state secrets, which, as it turned out, it did. "You're asking me to break into a military research facility," Joran said, leaning back in his chair. "Extract an alien prisoner. Fight my way past station security, and do it all without getting killed or arrested." "That's accurate summary," Alina admitted, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was proposing. Joran studied, her face in the blue glow of the cargo bay's emergency lighting. He'd met plenty of scientists in his years moving research supplies between colonies, but Dr. Vasquez was different. There was a core of steel beneath her academic exterior, the kind of determination that came from seeing something you couldn't. "Ignore what's in it for me," he asked. though they both knew he was already committed. Alina had sent him the translated recordings along with her message, and Joran had made the mistake of listening to them. The child's voice haunted his dreams now. "I can pay you," Alina said, reaching for her credit chip. "Keep your money." Joran stood and walked to the porthole overlooking Omega-7's docking bay. "I had a daughter once. Lost her when the colony ships were attacked near Kepler Station. She was about the same age as our prisoner down there." The silence stretched between them, filled with the quiet hum of the ship's life support systems. Finally, Alina spoke. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Just tell me you have a plan that doesn't end with all of us dead." Alina activated her datapad, displaying the station's schematics. "The subject is being held in Research Lab 7, 3 levels below the main deck. The lab has independent life support and multiple security checkpoints, but there's a maintenance shaft that runs parallel to the main corridor, connects to the lab's emergency ventilation system." Joran traced the route with his finger. "It's a narrow crawl space. You sure you can fit? I won't be going alone." Alina highlighted another section of the schematic. "Marcus Reed, the communications technician who discovered the signal, knows the station's layout better than anyone.
Odd.
And there's someone else, Commander Thea Cross, Station Security Chief."
Ow!
Joran raised an eyebrow. "That's either brilliant or suicidal. She doesn't know she's helping yet, but I've been monitoring her recent activity logs. She's been asking questions about the restricted levels, requesting access to areas she's never shown interest in before. I think she's starting to suspect something's wrong." Joran nodded slowly. He'd dealt with enough corrupt officials to recognize the signs of someone having a crisis of conscience. "When do we move?" "Tonight. The research staff runs skeleton crews during night cycle, and the security rotations have a 30-minute gap between shifts. That's our window." They spent the next several hours going over every detail of the plan. Alina would use her lab access to reach the restricted levels, while Marcus created a communications blackout to mask their activities. Joran would position his ship at the emergency docking port ready for immediate departure. Commander Cross would be their wild card if she could be convinced to help. She could provide the security clearance they needed. If not, she could end the operation before it began. As evening approached, Joran made his final preparations. He loaded medical supplies and emergency life support equipment into the ship's escape pods, configured for an alien physiology that might be different from human norms. The child had been tortured for months. There was no telling what condition they'd be in. His personal weapon locker yielded non-lethal restraints and stun grenades. Joran preferred to avoid killing when possible, but he wouldn't hesitate if the child's life was at stake. Some lines couldn't be crossed, and experimenting on children was definitely one of them. Alina arrived at the ship just after midnight, accompanied by a nervous-looking man in a communications uniform. Marcus Reed looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, but his hands were steady as he checked his equipment. Last chance to walk away, Joran told them both. "Once we start this, there's no going back. They'll hunt us across 3 systems, if they have to." "Then we better not get caught," Alina replied. Marcus just nodded, his jaw set with grim determination. Joran sealed the cargo bay and activated the ship's stealth systems. The Wayward Star might look like a battered freight hauler, but she had teeth when she needed them. Tonight, those teeth might be the only thing standing between an alien child and a slow death in a government laboratory. The rescue was about to begin. Nix had stopped counting the days since they brought her to this place. Time moved differently in the white-walled laboratory, marked only by the cycles of pain and the brief, merciful periods of unconsciousness between experiments. The scientists called her Specimen 47, but she remembered her real name whispered to her by a mother, whose face grew dimmer in her memory with each passing day. She was small, even by the standards of her hybrid heritage, barely reaching the shoulder of the shortest human researcher. Her skin had the translucent quality of her mother's people, shifting between pale blue and silver depending on her emotional state. Right now, it flickered between deep purple and black colors of fear and rage that the scientists dutifully recorded in their endless notes. The telepathic abilities that had made her valuable to the research project were also her curse. She could hear the thoughts of everyone around her, their clinical fascination mixing with casual cruelty. Dr. Morrison found her fascinating specimen material. Technician Walsh wondered if her pain responses were genuine or merely mimicry. Security guard Chen simply wished his shift would end so he could return to his card game. But tonight, something was different. New thoughts pressed at the edges of her awareness mind she'd never encountered before, focused with an intensity that cut through the usual background noise of the station. Someone was coming for her. Multiple someones, moving through the station with purpose and desperation. Nyx had learned to hide her abilities from the researchers. Pretending to be weaker than she was, it was the only power she had left, the ability to make them underestimate her. Now she reached out carefully with her mind, touching the approaching thoughts like a shy animal, testing the safety of offered food. The first mind she encountered blazed with protective fury, a woman whose thoughts tasted of complex linguistic patterns and fierce determination. Alina, the mind whispered back when Nyx brushed against it. We're coming. Hold on. The second mind was more practical, focused. On technical details and system overrides, Marquis came the identification, along with images of communication arrays and security protocols. He was afraid but committed, driven by memories of a sister he'd failed to protect long ago. The third mind was harder, scarred by loss and violence, but underneath the tough exterior burned a steady flame of justice. Joran, the name came with flashes of starships and distant worlds, of a daughter laughing in sunlight that no longer existed, and there was something else, a fourth presence, closer than the others, moving through the station's corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged. This mind was conflicted, torn between duty and conscience, but growing stronger with each step toward the restricted levels. The laboratory door hissed open, and Nyx quickly closed her mental barriers, pretending to be unconscious on the examination table where they'd left her. But instead of the familiar footsteps of Dr. Morrison or his assistants, she heard the measured pace of security boots. Jesus Christ, a voice whispered, female, older, carrying the weight of command authority. What have they done to you? Nyx cracked her eyes open to see a woman in a security uniform standing beside the table. Commander Cross, according to the nameplate on her chest. Her thoughts were a storm of horror and rage as she took in the monitoring equipment, the restraints, the medical charts documenting months of systematic torture disguised as research. I know you're awake, Commander Cross said softly. Your friend sent me ahead to check the security systems. You're almost here, friends. Nyx tested the word in her mind, rolling it around like a precious stone. She'd almost forgotten what it meant to have someone care whether she lived or died. Can you walk? The commander asked. Nyx tried to sit up, but the neural suppressors they'd attached to her temples sent spikes of agony through her skull. She gasped, her skin flickering to deep red as pain overwhelmed her control. Commander Cross's hands were gentle but efficient as she examined the restraint system. Biometric locks, she muttered. I need Morrison's clearance codes, too. The laboratory door opened again, and Dr. Morrison himself walked in, flanked by two guards. His mind registered surprise, then calculation, then cold determination as he assessed the situation. Commander Cross, he said pleasantly. I wasn't expecting a security inspection tonight. I'm placing you under arrest, Cross replied, her hand moving to her sidearm. Charges include illegal detention, torture of a sentient being, and violation of about 15 different interspecies protection protocols. Morrison smiled. I'm afraid that's not possible. This project has full authorization from Colonial Command. You have no jurisdiction here. The guards moved to flank Commander Cross, but she was already in motion. Her stun weapon dropped the first guard before he could draw his sidearm. The second managed to get off a shot that went wide, scorching the wall behind Nyx's table. In the chaos that followed, Nyx felt her telepathic barriers collapse. The neural suppressors, damaged by the stun weapon's energy discharge, flickered and died. For the first time in months, her abilities roamed free. Dr. Morrison's mind opened. To her like a rotted fruit, full of ambition and casual cruelty. Without conscious thought, Nyx reached into his thoughts and squeezed. The doctor collapsed, clutching his head and screaming. Commander Cross stared at her in amazement. "Remind me never to make you angry." Sound of approaching footsteps echoed. From the corridor outside, Alina, Marcus, and Joran burst through the door, armed and ready for a fight that was already over. "Time to go," Joran announced, his eyes taking in the unconscious guards and the whimpering researcher. "Station-wide alert just went active. They know we're here." Alina rushed to Nyx's side, her hands gentle as she examined the neural suppressors. "Can you remove these safely?" Nyx met her eyes the first time she'd made eye contact with another person in months. "Yes," she whispered, her voice rusty from disuse. "But I'll need help walking." "We've got you," Marcus said, and meant it. As they prepared to leave, Nyx took one last look at the laboratory that had been her prison. The white walls, the monitoring equipment, the table where they'd strapped her down and stolen pieces of her mind, all that would burn in her nightmares for years to come. But for the first time since she'd been brought here, she wasn't afraid. She had friends now. People who would fight for her, protect her, help her remember what it meant to be more than just Specimen 47. Her name was Nyx, and she was finally going home. Commander Thea Cross had spent 20 years in station security, following orders without question and maintaining the delicate balance that kept isolated research facilities running smoothly. But as she carried the alien child through the corridors of Omega-7, dodging security patrols and override codes, she realized some orders weren't worth following. Nyx clung to her with surprising strength for someone who'd been systematically tortured for months. The child's skin had shifted to a soft gold color which, according to Dr. Vasquez's hurried explanation, indicated cautious hope. Thea found herself protective of that fragile optimism in ways that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with basic human decency. "Security checkpoint ahead," Marcus reported through their makeshift communication system. "2 guards, armed, but they haven't been alerted yet." Thea made a command decision. "I'll handle them. Stay back until I give the all clear." She approached the checkpoint with the confident stride of someone who belonged, Nyx hidden beneath her security cloak. The guards snapped to attention as she approached. "Commander," the first guard said. "We weren't expecting emergency drill," Thea interrupted, her voice carrying the authority that had kept her alive through 2 decades of command decisions. "Stand down and return to your posts." It should have worked. If the station's alert systems hadn't chosen that moment to begin their piercing wail, red emergency lights bathed the corridor in hellish crimson. Suddenly everyone knew that something was very wrong in the restricted levels. The guards reached for their weapons, but Thea was faster. Her stun rifle dropped them both before they could raise an alarm. Behind her, she could hear Joran's approving grunt as he and the others emerged from the side corridor. "Nice work," the smuggler said, "but we're blown now. Every security team on the station will be converging on this position." Lena checked her scanner. "Docking Bay 7 is 2 levels up and 3 sections over. We can make it if we move fast." They ran through corridors that Thea had walked for years, but everything looked different now. The familiar walls and doorways had become obstacles in a desperate escape route. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit echoed through the stations. Metal arteries, boots on decking, shouted orders, the whine of charging weapons. Nyx's weight in her arms reminded Thea why they were running. Not for ideology or political principles, but for the simple, fundamental belief that children shouldn't be tortured in the name of science. It was a line that should never be crossed, regardless of the potential benefits to humanity. "Elevator bank ahead," Marcus called out. "But they're locked down. Emergency protocols." Joran produced a small device from his jacket, something that definitely wasn't standard shipping equipment. "Step back," he said, attaching it to the elevator controls. The magnetic clamp hummed for a moment, then the doors slid open with a soft chime. "Impressive," Thea remarked as they piled into the elevator car. "You pick up useful skills in my line of work," Joran replied. As they rose toward the docking level, Alina monitored Nyx's vital signs with a portable medical scanner. "Her physiology is stabilizing," she reported. Whatever they were doing to amplify her telepathic abilities was causing serious neurological damage. Nyx stirred in Thea's arms, her large eyes opening to focus on the commander's face. "Why?" she asked in her soft, alien-accented voice. It was the question Thea had been asking herself since she'd first seen the child strapped to that examination table. Why had she thrown away her career? How had she chosen to help people she barely knew rescue someone the government considered a test subject? Because it was right, she said simply. The elevator reached docking level 7, and they emerged into chaos. Security teams were sealing blast doors and checking every ship in the bay. The Wayward Star sat at the far end of the dock, her cargo ramp already lowered and engines warming up. There, Jorn pointed toward his ship. "We'll have to go through about 20 armed guards to reach it." Thea set Nix down gently and activated her command codes one last time. Her voice echoed through the docking bay's communication system. "All security personnel, this is Commander Cross. Stand down and clear the docking bay. Priority Alpha authorization." For a moment, it worked. The guards hesitated, caught between conflicting orders and their respect for Thea's authority. But then a new voice cut through the confusion. Dr. Morrison, apparently recovered from his telepathic encounter with Nix. "Commander Cross is compromised," his voice crackled over the speakers. "She is aiding in the theft of classified research materials. Stop them at all costs." The security teams raised their weapons, and Thea realized her last gambit had failed. They were trapped in the open with nowhere to run and an alien child to protect. That's when Nick stepped forward. The child's skin blazed with brilliant silver light, and suddenly every electronic system in the docking bay began to malfunction. Security weapons sparked and died. Emergency lights flickered and went out. Even the gravity generators wavered, creating pockets of weightlessness that sent guards tumbling through the air. "Go!" Nick shouted, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated through the metal structure of the station. "I can't hold this for long." They ran for the Wayward Star as chaos erupted around them. Guards struggled with malfunctioning equipment while automated systems failed throughout the docking bay. Joran's ship was already lifting off as they reached the cargo ramp. Alina and Marcus pulling Nix aboard while Thea provided covering fire with her sidearm. As the ship cleared the station's docking bay, Thea looked back at Omega 7 through the cargo hold's porthole. She'd spent the best years of her life on that station, building a career and a reputation that were now in ruins. But the small alien, child sleeping in the emergency medical bay, made it all worthwhile. "Where to now?" she asked Joran as he set course for the outer rim. "There's a colony ship in the Kepler system," he replied. "They take in refugees, no questions asked. It's not much, but it's safe." Alina looked up from her medical readings. "She's going to need specialized care. The neural damage is extensive. We'll find her what she needs," Thea said with quiet certainty. "She's been through enough." As the Wayward Star jumped to hyperspace, leaving Omega 7 far behind, Nix dreamed of sunlight on a world where children could play without fear, where telepathic abilities were gifts to be cherished rather than weapons to be exploited. For the first time in months, her dreams were filled with hope instead of nightmares. And in the ship's cargo hold, 4 unlikely allies began planning the next phase of their lives, bound together by the simple truth that sometimes the right choice is the hardest one to make. And that family isn't always about blood, but about the people willing to fight for each other when everything else falls apart. The signal and the static had been silenced, but its message lived on in the hearts of those who had chosen to listen.